Okay, let me introduce the next session. Before I do, a couple of announcements. Everybody remember there's a reception following the last session of the day. And I would like to thank the panelists that just finished for their session. It was a good way to finish the day, and I think they've done an excellent job.
I'm here.
All right, it's my pleasure to introduce the final session of the day, a fireside chat with Teresa Carlson, Vice President of Amazon Web Services, Worldwide Public Sector, and Dave Wennergren, Chief Executive Officer of the ACT-IAC. Teresa Carlson is the founder and leader of Amazon Web Services, AWS, Worldwide Public Sector. Today, tens of thousands of government agencies, education institutions, and nonprofit organizations use AWS to pursue the ways, disruptive innovation, and to make the world a better place. Through the charismatic leadership, Carlson has helped change mindsets of both individuals and organizations, modernize policies at all levels of government, and alleviate a 21st century global workforce equipped with skill sets necessary to leverage the World Wide Web. She also advises Amazon on global issues and is a strong advocate in empowering women in the technology fold. Dave Wennergren was named ACT-IAC CEO in April 2019, so he just recently has taken over the reins. Prior to ACT-IAC, he served as a member of the senior positions, most recently in the private sector, as Managing Director of Deloitte Consulting, Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer at the Professional Services Council, and as Vice President of CACI International. During Mr. Wennergren's career in government, he served as the Department of Navy Chief Information Officer, Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Information Management, Integration and Technology, Deputy Chief Information, Vice Chair of U.S. Government Federal CIO Council, and Department of Defense Assistant Deputy Chief Management Officer. He is a recipient of the FCW Fed 100 Award, and in 2007 was the Government Eagle Award winner. Teresa and Dave, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. You are the stalwart who have been here till the bitter end, and we're excited for you. And we won't make it be like church where we say you could come sit up front, but we expect your participation and enthusiasm wherever you are in the room. It's been an awesome day about new and emerging technology, and I am just so delighted to share the stage at the end of the day with a true titan, an icon in the tech industry. Teresa Carlson needs no introduction, although she did get a very robust one there.
Thank you.
I have had the honor and privilege of knowing Teresa for a long time, since your adventures leading Microsoft's federal practice and now leading worldwide public sector for AWS. Teresa is a Fed 100 Eagle Award winner herself, and I am delighted to have shared that honor with you. And I just want to say, but more importantly, wise advice and counsel and your friendship over the years have just meant so much to me. So you got a true thought leader in the stage with you today, and we are willing to take your questions. So, you know, we're the only thing standing between you and the reception. So, you know, if you keep it lively, you'll be ready to go when we get there.
We could even bring the alcohol in here.
Well,
how about that?
We may if the audience is engaged.
That's right.
All right, look, so we live, you've been hearing it all day long. We live in sort of a perfect storm. There's this abundance of new technologies that can just change the way we live, work, and play. And we all have these expectations about how different things will be because of how we live our personal lives in a mobile, app-based world and how we want to see that in our government interactions as well. So there's just no shortage of enthusiasm to embrace this future. I will say there are some challenges that stand in the way, you know, IT modernization being one of them. If you're living off of old infrastructure, if you're living off of old systems, it makes it really hard to adopt the new stuff. So this path that we're on about, you know, embracing cloud and moving forward with cloud, and then looking at the thousands of legacy systems that we have and figuring out what you want to do with them, what you want to retire, what you want to replace, what you want to refresh, will lead us on this path that can get us to a world of many new technologies, changing the way we deliver services to the citizen and changing mission outcomes.
So true.
And so we're going to talk about a few things. We'll end our talk by talking about the farther out future.
Okay.
But I thought maybe we could start with some perspectives about in the near term.
Sure.
In the near term, as you survey the world that you look after,
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about the tech trends that you see that are having an impact on government.
Well, by the way, thank you for having me. And I know it is the end of the day, but these are really important conversations for us to have. And also, it's important for us to work together on how we drive this change between government and industry. And that's the thing I've always loved about ACT-IAC. It's one really great place that you can bring together government and industry and not just have a dialogue, but really truly drive change. So, and I think I'm excited about Dave being here now, and excited for myself and AWS to support, so thank you. So I will quickly tell you about, I started AWS in public sector in December of 2010. And when I started this in December 2010, I ran a fairly significant practice at Microsoft, and people said, why would you change? Why would you go do something different? And I couldn't exactly pinpoint it at the time because cloud was so new, but my customers were asking me for something different. And Dave, you were a big part of that. You had been in government. You were asking for things to be delivered in a different way, to be more agile, to move much faster, and have the security that was required. And the one thing I remember hearing about General Campbell, who was a 4-star in the Army, he ran U.S. forces. I remember him one time getting up on a board and putting a triangle on the board, and he put better, faster, cheaper. And then he put security around it. And he said, do you know, and we were in the heart, we were at war at the time, and the Army was tired. It was rough on them, tons of deployments, and they needed a lot of technology. And he said, if I get something faster, it's not cheaper, and it's not necessarily better. And if I get something better, then it's not fast, but it's also not cheap. And then I have to worry. He said, I can never get the 4 of these. And I thought about that so much. And coming to AWS, it's the one big thing I see that was a trend that people have always asked for, going fast and not sacrificing security or innovation. And that is the one big thing that people ask for around the world, is they want better, they want faster, they want less expensive if possible for government in particular, but they have to have security. They cannot sacrifice security. So that still remains kind of a trend of what they want, but now they're getting it. So the other thing is experimentation. Governments talk a lot and want to use experimentation in what they're doing, which used to be impossible because back in the day, nobody ever wanted to fail at anything because it would be so visible. And today, like that whole thing has changed where governments want the ability to kind of, they want to trial and try something, that fast experimentation, and then scale it. And then not just scale it, but then continually innovate on it. And that is what you're seeing. And I think with the onslaught of cloud computing, commercial cloud computing in government, they're learning now that they can do those things, that they don't have to sacrifice one of the 4. They can have them. They can move fast. And they can have trial and error because experimentation is part of the American way. I mean, everything we're built on, from Ben Franklin to developing, electricity to the steam engine, it's all about experimentation. And we have to allow our governments to have that experimentation. And then one last thing, that was kind of the big view, but the other big trend for sure is workforce and digital skills. Because, and we can go into that however you want, Dave, but it is still, security used to be the first thing that people wanted, and they would talk about. That they'd say, well, we can't do cloud because of security. Well, security, now they go to the cloud, but workforce by far is what people now around the world are concerned about, that their people at all levels, from students through their workforce, are being trained in a way that are prepared for a digital economy. And so I'll kind of stop there, but those are...
You covered so many great points in there, and I loved your point about experimentation because, if you ever read the Innovator's Dilemma book years ago by Clayton Christensen, it talked about how highly successful organizations actually have a harder time trying to get the new thing implemented than perhaps new companies do. And so this whole idea about how you can sort of avoid the antibodies coming too soon before you have a chance to get a foothold by declaring something an experiment or a pilot or sort of safe space, that this isn't to get in the way of the programs of record, but this is an opportunity to do risk reduction or something else that's a little bit more palatable. And then once it takes root and it gets all that enthusiasm, you know, I'm sure you've seen like so many things in your career. And I would thank you for the kind words that you said to start this out about the opportunity that forums like this provide to collaborate together. And I'm wondering maybe we could just talk about that a little bit more, because I bet you've seen like where it works really well and where it doesn't. Maybe you have like a sense of a current or past client or something that, you know, the power of collaboration. Rarely do problems live within a single organization anymore. And so this need for government and industry to talk more and to be able to get to the right answer together, that we're all smarter by working together, is just hugely important. Events like this matter. Organizations like ours and others matter because they help to enrich that dialogue. But maybe you could talk about like some of your best practices you see around collaboration.
Well, you know, I'll tell a story because it's very interesting about a little country called Bahrain. And Bahrain is the first country in the Middle East that we're launching an AWS cloud region in. And the reason it sticks out in my mind is it's a small country, but an important country. The U.S. forces are there. We have a naval base in Bahrain. The British have a base as well, an armed forces base there. And they're they're almost kind of like a Switzerland of the Middle East. People kind of like them. They're next to Saudi Arabia, just across the chasm, or there's a bridge that you can go across. But the reason I brought them up, Dave, is we needed to figure out a place in the Middle East we could build a region. And what I found in this journey is that maturity, wherever you go around the world to take on digital, is very different. So in the U.S. here, you know, our largest footprint of cloud computing is in Northern Virginia. And we're the top customer, one of the top customers of Dominion Power. We use a lot of power, but power, you can get it green here. It's inexpensive. Telecommunications is advanced here. You can negotiate good telecommunications rate. You can work with builders. But the further you go outside of the epicenter of the United States, things change. Telecommunications prices, they're duopolies or monopolies owned by the government and controlled by the government, which we don't see that here. You know, we regulate things. We try not to control them, which is a good thing. Utilities are much more expensive. So when you're going into a digital world, we have to walk in and really educate countries and groups on a digital change. That if they want to become digital, they need to have the appropriate telecommunications, pricing, and models that they can work with companies like this. Utility rates have to work. And then policies. It all comes back to policies, Dave, believe it or not. And if you don't have the right policies to drive a process, that's hard. So what worked in this little country of Bahrain, now that we've taken and we're using it in lots of places around the world, is working with economic development groups, which we did in Crystal City, by the way, in Virginia. We kind of used our models that we figured out around the world, even working here in the U.S., where you can go in and work with them on a model to modernize. Now, we're not building, cloud centers there, but we're building a workforce there. I mean, here in Crystal City. In Bahrain, we've worked with them on a digital footprint for education. What are all the skills? They're working. We've set up cloud innovation centers. They have changed their policies and laws around acquisition and procurement. They have a cloud-first policy. They're going all in the government on cloud. But something else they did was they created a data jurisdiction law, which is really crazy. You know, you hear about people worried about putting their data in locations. They created a law that basically says if you put your data that's government or regulated data in the AWS region in Bahrain, it will be treated like sovereign data. So if it's Saudi data or US data, they're picking some allies. It won't be everybody to start, but it's game changing. And we helped them with this recommendation because they said, we want to create more trade. We're not going to live on oil forever. They are a working country. They're not like every other Middle Eastern country. So it was so interesting, but we did that through a consortium where the leadership, the Crown Prince, said, here's a person in charge, which is the Economic Development Board, and they literally set up like a concierge service with us, and if we had an issue working through things, they would call up the utilities people. We would set up a meeting. But we worked through these issues that could have taken us, it could have taken us 20 years. And we worked through them in about, 18 to 24 months before we were able to say, there's a good financial model that we could come in and build a region where it works for the customer. It's not just about us. We were trying to help them understand to be successful. Here was the model, because we could have gone in and sold them a bunch of stuff, but we don't do that. We go and invest billions when we go in, and then we look for a very long-term return on investment. So our model is the same in government. We don't ask governments to pay us a whole bunch up front. We say we will deliver the services ahead of demand, ahead of what you need for innovation. We'll keep doing that as long as, we see the services are needed, but we look for that in a long-term way. So I think just really pulling people together, just like we would here, even in a small community, and say, what things do we need to help government accomplish, and put our heads together, and then just start tackling them and breaking down those barriers.
Yeah, the issue of trust is just so important, because the model that you're using is one where you're building these high trust relationships that just pay huge dividends in terms of getting to the best answer. And I would offer that as you think through the adoption of new technologies, the single biggest issue you will face in the cultural change battle is the fact that so many of us live in low trust environments.
Yes.
And the other powerful point that you made is around the data. And there's so many new technologies that are just so cool, and I would love to spend time talking about today. But first and foremost, anything that helps us unlock the data.
Completely.
And get value out of it. Because, too often when it's time to face a new technology, I look around the room, I look at the people who are exhibiting today. There are just so many cool technologies. To think about the power of AI and machine learning and process robotics, blockchain, AR and VR. There's just so many cool things that you could be doing,
And they work.
Yes.
They actually work today, and I think that is what blows people's mind,
Yes.
is that the technology is capable of doing what it says it's going to do. And again, back to old days of government, where I think the government was so worried about it won't work, the project's not going to go anywhere. And today, the most delightful thing that happens to me every day is hearing my customers want to tell their story. Like, I don't even have to tell the story. I could be back there and my customers could tell a story, because they're delighted that they're actually making progress for the mission, because the technology enablement is really happening for them.
Yeah. That's just such a powerful thing, right? Because it encourages others. You, as change agents, you are like the lightning rods, right, or the ripples on the pond, and a little bit of angst, a little bit of jadedness or cynicism on your part creates this echoing chamber around you. But on the other hand, the ability to tell the successful story just builds so much energy, and that's why the data is so important, because so oftentimes we want to make choices about new technologies based on, I'll say, fear and anecdote.
Yeah.
And if instead we can focus on letting the data drive decision making, what a wonderful place it would be. I'd like to come back to the topic that you started us with, which is about the workforce.
Yeah.
Because, it is a fascinating time. I often opine, I can say this because I'm an aging baby boomer myself, but many of the skills and experiences that I had through my career that brought me to where I am today may not be the set of skills and experience that I need to be successful in this new world of new technologies.
Yeah.
And so you have sort of the twin sets of issues around the training and new skill development for the existing workforce, and then the ability to attract and retain the workforce of the future, which is a huge issue for both government and industry.
Completely.
But I wonder if you want to share some thoughts about the workforce.
Well, the workforce, again, like I said, it is truly the number one thing every customer wants to talk about around the world, because this new world of cloud and DevOps and the elements of all that have really changed technology. And most universities today are still not teaching and training the latest and greatest when it comes to coding and other computer science skills. So what we've done a few things, because we do feel, being the largest cloud computing company, we've got to help. And we do that in multiple ways. One is we created something called AWS Educate, where we work with professors, but high school through college, And we provide them credits and training and modules so they can do online training. They can do like badging along the way so they can get skills that they can train on, like AI machine learning as a badge. We have an Alexa badge. We have American Heart Association badge which deals with data sets and machine learning around precision medicine platform. We're announcing a robotics one and some others kind of coming out here shortly. But we do that so students can learn along the way and then get certified by the end of their course. And once they're certified, they go on a jobs board. In the jobs board, we're doing now job matching between our customers and ourselves with skills, so you can literally do outreach. I call it the Tinder for cloud skills matching. So, okay, guys, that's a little funny. Tinder, right? We're going to match them in a different way. I will tell you, Tinder runs on AWS. And I met the CTO, and I said to him, I said, I want a Tinder, like I want to do this, and I want to do this for, skills matching. And he told me that it was originally, they started it thinking about a social good platform. And I said, well, some people might say you're doing social good, matching people up. I don't know. So, so that's one thing. Then we have over 300 online digital courses for free. And then now we're working with, we just announced, which I don't know if you guys heard this, if you come to the AWS Summit, which is next week, last year we announced a 2-year AWS associate's degree with Northern Virginia Community College. And they had their first 30 students. We announced it in June. They opened up the courses in the fall. We had 30 students. This year we have 100, and they said that they're sold out already, like it's booming. And then we've now announced that with Columbus, LA Community Colleges, they're 19, and they bring in high schoolers. So the high school students can now get skilling. And I won't tell you, what, but we're going to be announcing some other new programs next week, which I'm excited about, Dave. And I will tell you, we just had our first 9-year-old pass the solution architecture exam, which, by the way, on average, if you're new, is about $125,000 a year out of the gate. Like if you're like new to technology.
There's your workforce of the future.
9 years old. He and his father took it together, so he's going to actually be there next week. But the skills are being taught. It's interesting because you almost have to make it mandatory. And even in high schools, one of the things I advocate for, we can't make it optional anymore for high school students to actually take computer science courses. It just can't be optional. It's got to be like reading, math, science, and I think you have to teach the soft skills. But I think as a nation, we are behind some of the other countries, especially, of course, in Asia, on what they're doing. So I think the U.S. we've kind of got to catch up on this. But it's exciting. There's tons of jobs. I mean, the jobs they're amazing. They're out there. We just have to get more people skilled.
Yeah, absolutely. If you look at the classic sort of like technology challenge, they often show the 3 spheres of people, process, and technology that you have to keep your eye on. And I'll just sort of stipulate that the technology circle, I mean, it's there.
Yeah.
I mean, we often spend so much of our time thinking about that, but the technologies are there if we can take advantage of it. To your point, the people circle is the huge big one, and it's both about the right set of skills to be prepared for the way work will be done, the changes that the future of work and AI will just make the nature of jobs different, and many of your agencies are already seeing this just with the adoption of robotic process automation, taking routinized tasks and letting machines do that so that humans can do more creative thinking work and stuff like that. But beyond that too, the willingness to embrace the cultural change that will take place too is just as important to people impact. And of course that third circle, the process stuff, we can't lose sight of that because trying to insert new technologies on really antiquated processes doesn't necessarily get you the best outcome.
It's true. And on the machine learning and AI as an example, and that, there are a lot of people that are very, even we have a tool called Recognition that one of our partners called Thorn uses. And Recognition is an object recognition tool. And they use it for a tool called Spotlight to go on the dark web and find perpetrators for sex traffickers and individuals who have actually kidnapped young children and women and men and put them in very bad situations. And Spotlight was started, or Thorn was started by Ashton Kutcher and Demi Moore for one goal, which was to find these children being sex trafficked. And they use machine learning to go on the dark web and look for, they do 150,000 ads a day looking for, you can look at, through machine learning, look at handwriting analysis, and it will tell you through grammar and syntax and the style what the age of the person is. So what they do is they a lot of times have the child write their own ad because there's some law that it's a lesser of a crime, which is hard for me to believe, but they know all the, of course, tips and tricks of these trades. So we are seeing that being used, but also if you think justice and public safety, they cannot look at these images all the time. You know, they need to have tools and mechanisms that helps us scale and do things like this that are horrible, horrible things that need to be, you know, brought to the public eye for justice. But we need to use technology for things like that that actually can help us move faster, but not put our people at risk while doing it as well.
Important. We'd love to hear from you if you have a question. We have lots of opinions about all manner of things. I'm going to ask Teresa one more question and let you guys get teed up.
Okay.
Microphones will be coming your way. So we talked about near-term trends, but now I'm going to ask you to get out your crystal ball or your magic 8 ball, depending on your preferred oracle, and think about like a little farther out.
Yeah.
What are the sort of the emerging technologies that you think may have a profound impact in the government market going forward? Are there some things that you have an eye on that?
Well, I think there's two big things I think about, and I know it seems like it should be apparent, but it's still not being done, is just that rapid agility for like applications to be developed so much faster and the learning and security of those applications. I do believe through the new tools and technologies that we are going to see kind of much more of a working backwards process from government to say, what do our mission or citizens need? And they'll work rapidly backwards. I'm already seeing some of this from our government agencies, but where they are working backwards and rapidly developing. Because if you think about it, Dave, the old model was requirements were built for acquisitions, and people would try to go out and kind of fulfill this acquisition that was outdated before it got out there. Now you can do things in a way that you can write it and create a model and a tooling so you can rapidly update and innovate. So I do think that is the future, quickly to see that fast pace of innovation without doing things in a way that they fail and then people are embarrassed and don't want to talk. So I think that rapid innovation. I think tools like voice, AI, machine learning will be used for government good and mission good, and to catch the bad guys and gals faster. So I think you're going to see that AI, machine learning being used, and voice to rapidly, you know, if you think about Alexa for us, today you can use her already for AI and machine learning, and a lot of our customers are, and quickly ask her to assess and analyze information and give you the outputs. You can do that again even through call centers, so you can quickly cut through a lot of things through AI machine learning. With like a call center is just a great quick example of that. Diagnosis, you know, for healthcare. So I think I think you'll see just those tools used a lot more in government to speed things and help citizen services capabilities. In space, we just launched something called AWS Ground Station at reInvent. And I think space will become more and more important. I believe the tooling, because information flow and travel through space, even things we'll be doing, if you ever look at what Jeff, we have a patent where he believes we will have fulfillment centers in space. And then we'll fulfill from there and move it around on drones and other things. And I do think space, we're seeing it become, again, important, which is, I don't think people believe we'd ever have a space force, but it makes a lot of sense. And then wars will be fought in cyber, which we know, so that information dissemination and the ability to move it and understand it will be much more important. I think, lastly, the big thing I believe that we will see is you will see local governments and state governments innovate a lot more, especially at the local level. We're already seeing that driven down where a federal government can't support everything, and they're learning how to utilize technology to make their local government more efficient in that workforce, to become more digital so that they can create businesses in a more of a localized community. And the reason you see that trend, look at Steve Case, who's out there doing the rise of the rest, the rise of the nations, to look for startups that are doing amazing things that were never identified. And technology is enabling that because you're seeing disruption of industries. If you think about Uber, Airbnb, those disrupted industries because technology made that available. Netflix, Amazon Prime. Whoever thought you wouldn't be just watching TV every night, now you can make decisions on the fly. So I think a lot of that we will see being applied to government in a much more unique way because they're learning how to take those technology enablements and infuse them into real application development.
This sort of nexus of AI and the Internet of Things and mobility and data are just like fundamentally changing things. I know when I was at Deloitte, we had a building in Amsterdam that was completely smart, and the things that it could do, it was just amazing how it helped you, and even just the simple things about managing a life from the moment that you arrived through the day. And I mean, there's just thousands of examples of that. And so that power to just change everything by bringing all those technologies together is really near term.
And we have to have security. I think we can never sacrifice security. And I will say the big scary part of all this, when I am around the world, I do see a lot of cyber attacks and ransom of data around the world with lots of governments. They lock them down. They ransom their sovereign funds. There is a lot of that going on, and we are so much more advanced in this country and yet still behind on security posture because most countries don't even have basic principles of security and compliance. You think about us with our FedRAMP and our other tooling, we have to introduce a lot of those basic principles of just how can you stop a malware attack? How do you identify it? If a DDoS is hitting you, how can you slow it down before it really hurts you? How do you look at one government agency and understand if it was attacked, you probably have another one on the way being attacked? Like just those principles that we kind of get here, a lot of countries still don't even kind of get those basic principles.
And I will foot stomp that because it's a subject area that I care passionately about. Having had a lot of information security professionals work for me, and we don't thank them enough when nothing bad happens today. We only shine a spotlight on when something bad happens. But I will say, underlying what you said is this model that has to change, though, because we used to always feel better when it was ours, and like our enclave and our stuff. And the prize going forward is it's a much more commercial world. Mm-hmm. And so, we have to take the best of programs that we have that look to improve security and make sure that we're thinking through things about, what does the commercial model provide to us? Because it always seems easier or better to have the one-off for ourselves, but oftentimes that will just drive up costs and preclude the access to the innovative new tools and stuff.
And the patching and all is not there. It's really hard. I tell everybody, guns, guards, fences, and dogs don't protect your data anymore. That's the kind of old way of thinking.
Cost centers and time sink for you. Who had the first question? I think over here. Thank you.
Yes, hello. John Pilotich. I'm with the State Department. In fact, I'm managing a program called the Digital Economy Officers Program, trying to do precisely what you were just describing in terms of sensitizing both our officers at Post, our economic officers, and getting them to also be able to be up on their game to promote our companies, frankly, as well as companies of like-minded countries, let's say, that have a more free market approach. But there are several things that I would like to touch on that you had mentioned. But firstly, I would say that we also had earlier an ambassadors panel, and we had the honor to host His Excellency Abdullah Al Khalifa, the ambassador of Bahrain, who gave us a fantastic presentation. A good presentation on. He didn't mention, I have to say, the data jurisdiction law. He was mentioning more broader strokes, if I can say, as maybe expected from an ambassador. But I wanted to sort of dig in a little bit with you on that one, just because we're also very much cognizant of sort of data localization policies that prevent e-commerce or hamper it, for example. And I was curious about the sort of sovereignty idea and behind this data jurisdiction legislation. We have a program also called the Digital Connectivity and Cybersecurity Partnership that was just announced by Secretary Pompeo last summer. We're just fleshing it out now and being able to really sort of wield it, if I can say. And I'd be curious to ask both. Are you seeing any sort of? Are you seeing from this ecosystem that's being developed in Bahrain the ability to ensure that data is able to freely flow and ensure that the commerce isn't disrupted, for example? And are you the second sort of part would be, are you maybe, do you have any sort of advice for us on countries or regions where you think that this might be also good to look at for example, for some of our other programming?
That's a great question. So the data flow between countries kind of does depend, because back to that network connectivity, and I'll give you a really good example. The UAE is a place that has the duopoly, right? Du and Etisalat are their two telecommunications groups, and they charge so much they'll slow things down so they can block traffic. So then one of the other steps that we have to do by ourselves or with that government is go in and negotiate with them to unblock that traffic. And you'd be shocked at all there is. And then we've got to make sure that we have the appropriate either terrestrial or underseas cables to be able to move that data flow through. So it depends, and I would love to come and have my team do a whole mapping. I've learned much more about networking and telecommunications than I ever thought I would. So yes, in some countries it works, in others we still are working on it. We're launching our first region in South Africa here shortly as well. But the one thing that we hear from the World Bank and State Department is that countries are actually starting to say, I'm worried about my data in my own country because of war possibilities, what could happen, and they want a location working in partnership with the State Department or World Bank or UN for someone to say, help us with what those policies should be, like a data jurisdiction law or data sovereignty. And by the way, since you're at State Department, we used to call this our data embassy, because we said we should treat it like an embassy on that soil. But there are some, Latin America is very interested in this, Mexico is, Colombia is, there's quite a few. Indonesia's kind of touched on it gently. But I'd love to come and sit and talk to you about that and see if there's something that we could even do jointly around this, because I think this data jurisdiction law needs to be looked at carefully by the U.S. government and some others to say how, with our allies or groups or countries we're infusing money into, do we want to help with that? So I'd be happy to. So let's talk a little bit afterwards.
All right, so we have time for one last quick question, and then we have the 30-second lightning round. We're going to let, each of us is going to do a tip on surviving and thriving in these times of change. But
okay.
We're going to hear one last quick, because we're the only thing standing between you and the reception at this point. Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to be as succinct as possible. I had a lot of comments to make, but I wanted to just say first, I'm thankful for all the conversations about human trafficking. And one of the things that we are faced with coming up in HHS is the QSMO headed under Sheila Connolly, who's going to be making certain that these technologies get out to the grant-making world. We're the #1 agency, and we've been designated to implement this. So I'm looking from the perspective of grantees who already don't trust, and there's the trust component came up many times, but how do we introduce these concepts to them? How do we make an assessment or allow them to make an assessment about which of these technologies is most appropriate for them? And then the educational piece that you talked about, what are those key solid places that really provide good sources of information so that those organizations, nonprofit organizations that are on the front line, still doing paper, on any type of continuum, how do they get started? And those are things that we really need. The change management piece, the organizational change management, not the technologies, but the pieces that undergird that, and where are the resources that we need to look to educate them.
Well, I'm so glad you asked this question, because I have to tell you, when I set this business up in 2010, I set it up to have not-for-profit and NGOs, government and education together, which most people had never done. And I did this intentionally because I saw that we needed to bring together the granting world, the education world, and the not-for-profit government world. But in child trafficking, I would love to work with you, because we work with ICMIC, and we've done a bunch with them to help. And this has all been for good. We want to help here, but I think the tools are there. And last year we did a whole day off on the side of my summit just to talk about trafficking. And what we missed, by the way, which I told my team afterwards, we didn't have our government partner there. We didn't have you, we didn't have Department of Justice, we didn't have State Department, which we should have had there. We've learned a lot because I said if we're really going to solve this problem, we need to bring all those groups together in the same room and have a conversation about what's working, what's not working. Because sometimes, and I say this respectfully, when government can't go as fast, a private partnership can go faster. And we're kind of seeing that with tools like Thorn and Polaris and ICMEC. But I would tell you on the granting world, I have a team that just works on research grants with NSF and NIH. And we are literally, we have helped to create a model where it's called the Cloud Access Program for grants that you probably know about this now, where this is through NSF, and I think you guys are looking at it, where you can use cloud end to end because we were getting feedback that they were spending too much on on-premise infrastructure that they couldn't really get the results. So we put that program, and we're helping to write grant ideas around these, what I call make the world a better place problem. So I'd love to share with you what we're doing, and if you think we can help write some models, let's do it. I have a whole team focused on this, and it's about trying to get grants out there, and we've got Google and other people involved. This is not just about us trying to own all this. We're just trying to open up a platform for grant dollars to really go solve these problems in the right way. So I'd love to work with you and talk to you about that.
All right. You've been so gracious with your time. Do you have a last piece of advice about how to thrive in times of change?
I would say you got to be really resilient. It's hard. The one thing I found, I was just talking to my friend Ann Armstrong back there, I have known forever. You know, you got to be a real leader in these times and be convicted that have a conviction about that what you're doing is the right thing to do, because people don't always want to change. They don't want to innovate. And you have to be a leader in your space and really push for this. And I'll tell you why. We need it as a nation. We have got to maintain where we are in power and authority. We have got to protect our workforce. We've got to protect our men and women in the military. And I would say resilience and kind of really thinking big and high ownership. And that's my one piece of advice, because you know, when I started at AWS, Amazon had never really worked with government, and they didn't get it, and now they are huge believers. And I have such like dedication and thought leadership with Jeff Bezos and Andy Jassy, because it wouldn't have been possible, but they really see that technology can drive big change for all the efforts we're doing. And the one thing we've always said, Dave, we are not backing down off supporting our mission. Like we've stuck with it the day we started, and we are not backing down. Some people may not, they'd like to see us not be here, but we believe that by our partnership with government and us bringing in all of the partners we know about will just help us be a better nation and help us support those nations that we work with to be better at what they do. So I don't know if that's a little piece of advice or a big piece of advice.
That's perfect. Times of change are times of opportunity, you know, and you can ride the waves of change to make progress that you might not have otherwise done it, because you have an audience that's willing and receptive to be able to embrace new technologies. If you don't ride the waves, then you will get overwhelmed by them.
Yeah.
I know you have to get to another event.
Dave,
and
thank
I'm
you so
appreciative.
much.
Would you
Thank
join me in
you.
thanking
Thank
Teresa
you, guys.
Carlson? As I
And
say
come
here-
next